Ata Mārie, kia tātou katoa, good morning. You'll never truly understand, I think, from the pictures that you see in the newspaper or on the 6 o'clock news, the sheer scale of the destruction wrought by Cyclone Gabrielle. 2 weeks ago, Marama and I were standing in our gumboots in the ruins of an apple orchard in Puketapu in Hawke's Bay. The trees and the posts were buried in a metre of silt, and in some places the piles of silt were over our heads. The water lines on the houses that had not been washed away were 2 metres up, where the floodwaters had been lapping at the upper floors of the houses. And the family that we spoke to had spent hours on the roof of their home waiting for the waters to subside. Buried in the silt were wrecked cars, caravans, debris from the houses further up the valley. So I would like to begin today by acknowledging the 15 people who lost their lives to, and the tens of thousands of people who were displaced by Cyclone Gabrielle and the floods here in Auckland and in Aotearoa in a couple of weeks prior. New Zealand is now experiencing the reality of climate change. And Green Party co-leaders have been delivering a State of the Planet address at the start of the parliamentary year, most years, for over 2 decades now. The leaders of other political parties give speeches on the state of the nation, but the Green Party's view is that the state of any, and in fact all nations, and the people who live in them, depends entirely on a healthy environment. So welcome to this year's State of the Planet address. You are here because you want to change Aotearoa for the better, to play a part in building a future in which every aspect of our lives is not defined by a climate crisis, where we are protecting and restoring the natural world that surrounds us and supports us, where everyone has a roof over their heads and food over the table. None of us here accept the world as it is. We see a world that could be, and we know that change will only come if ordinary, committed people like you come together to shape it. So, today, I want to talk as clearly and as plainly as I can about just what is at stake this year, about how we make this moment, a turning point for real change, about why climate action is on the ballot paper this year, about what a stronger green voice in government will mean for our communities over the next 5 years or the next 10 years and beyond. And just shy of 6 years ago, we made history. Our party, a small party started 3 decades ago by a group of environmental activists, entered government with ministers for the first time. 3 years ago, we made history again. We became the first government support partner ever to return to Parliament with more MPs. It had never been done before. And you know what? This year we're going to do it again. Labour and National may be duking it out for the so-called political centre, but this October, New Zealand will either elect the most progressive, climate-focused government that we have ever had, a government that will not rest until we lift every family out of poverty, a government that will place nature at the heart of everything that we do, a government that will be guided by Te Tiriti o Waitangi, a government that confronts climate change with the urgency and the scale that it demands, a government that has a strong green heart at its beating centre, or hand the keys to the most reactionary, race-baiting, right-wing government that we have seen in decades. A government for the wealthy few at the expense of many, not just in this generation, but also those to come. A government of climate inaction and delay. And that is because we know one thing for sure: no one party can win a majority on their own this election. Just like Labour will need our support, the only way that Christopher Luxon, or whoever follows him, will become the Prime Minister is with the support of David Seymour and the ACT Party. An ACT Party that has pledged to restart oil drilling in Maui dolphin habitats, that has pledged to ditch our climate targets, that has pledged to tear up Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and that has pledged to cut taxes for the wealthiest few. An ACT Party which said of climate change only a few years ago that the threat of extreme weather events was, quote, unproven conjectures. Well, tell that to the people of Taitokerau and Auckland and Coromandel and Tairawhiti and Hawke's Bay. And even in the wake of these climate disasters, they dare to suggest that we should dismantle the entire framework that we have built with bipartisan support to guide this country to a zero-emission, climate-resilient future. The worst possible outcome that I can imagine from this year's election is a national ACT alliance in government. It would be an alliance addicted to fossil fuels and to helping the wealthiest and the most powerful. Families will be left struggling to make ends meet. Schools and hospitals will be run into the ground. Our natural world will be further eroded away. The Crown's obligations to Māori under Te Tiriti will be dishonoured. And our communities will be more at risk from supercharged floods and fires and droughts and storms. And over the course of this election campaign, we can expect both National and ACT to promise simple fixes to complex problems, to resort to fear, to appeal to ordinary working mums and dads, only to turn their backs on them as they roll out policies to cater to the wealthiest and to the most powerful. So I ask you to look at the people who will make up the cabinet in a National ACT alliance and ask yourselves this: who do you want making those decisions that affect your life and the lives of the people that you love? Now, I know that I haven't got every decision that I have made in government right.
That's true.
But I have I have brought my values into every decision that I have made. Those decisions have set Aotearoa on the path, finally, to a zero-carbon future. Those decisions reflect who I am, my values, and the things that I hold dear. And I became an environmentalist on the 10th of July, 1985. Just before midnight, 2 explosions ripped through the hull of the Rainbow Warrior, the Greenpeace flagship. I was 12 years old at the time, and I found out about it at school the next day. I remember being completely shocked as my teacher explained what had happened. Because up until that point, I have to tell you, I'd been pretty focused on my own immediate world. But the bombing of the Rainbow Warrior was the moment when I got a sense of what was going on in the world beyond my own. And I was shocked by it. I was outraged by it. And it changed the course of my life forever. 5 years later, in the middle of the 1990 election campaign, I joined the Green Party. 2 years after that, I ran for office for the first time for the Western Ward of the Wellington City Council. I lost to a guy called Andy Foster. But that campaign taught me something important. It taught me about bringing people together with a shared vision of the future. And it made me realise that what matters most about politics isn't the headlines or the meetings or the speeches. It's about people. And I know that for many of the people who are watching right now, the struggle to put food on the table, to pay the bills, is the concern that rises above all others. It's the worry that keeps you up at night, and it's the first thought that you have when you wake up again in the morning, and understandably so. There is nothing more important than a warm, safe, affordable home with food on the table and the people that we love. And now, 3 decades after those first campaigns, we are on the cusp of a third term. And it is very easy, I think, to forget just how far we have come since we first entered government 5.5 years ago. When people ask me if we can do enough, quickly enough, to meet our emissions reductions targets, I have to remember that before 2017, even the idea of legislated emissions reductions targets was completely out of reach. So I am proud of all of us that in the last 5.5 years we have taken more action on climate change than the combined efforts of governments over the last 30 years. I am proud too that we have delivered the biggest increase in funding ever to protect our native plants and animals, that we've provided more support for low-income families to make sure that their homes are warm and dry, that we have helped tens of thousands of people to buy clean running zero-emission vehicles paid for by fees on the most polluting vehicles. I am proud of taking coal out of every school in the country, that most harmful of fuels that we have used from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, gone from our schools, for good. I am proud of Marama Davidson, who is changing the way that our government works to help children and families and whānau keep safe at home. And I'm proud of the ground that we've gained in areas where we don't have ministers, pushing the government to adopt Green Party policies on areas like rainbow rights and drug law reform and seabed mining and electoral reform. I am proud of each and every one of our MPs, and I am struck by the impact that they are having on people's lives, and also by the breadth of the issues on which they are making a difference, making change in areas that benefit everyone, no matter who you are, or where you're from, or what you look like, or who you love. Now, is it enough? No, of course not. It is not even close. Climate pollution is not coming down fast enough. Far too many families are forced to pay through the roof to rent cold, damp and unhealthy homes. The wildernesses and the wildlife that we depend on for our very existence are disappearing before our eyes. And the distribution of wealth in this country is completely out of balance. Right now, half of all New Zealanders own just 2% of the country's wealth. And the top 10% of New Zealanders hold around 60% of all wealth. And how can it be that banks can make record profits while tens of thousands of people struggle to make ends meet? One of the great privileges of my job, of our jobs, is that I get to travel around the country meeting people from all walks of life. And in these conversations, whether it's with firefighters or farmers and climate activists or families who've lost everything in Cyclone Gabrielle or in the floods in Auckland and Aotearoa before that, I hear the same thing. A genuine and legitimate frustration with the pace of change. And I gotta tell you, it sure frustrates the heck out of me. And I know that you are frustrated with a government that has stopped short of doing what it takes to tackle those big challenges, whether it's excess bank profits or skyrocketing rents or worsening inequality. It frustrates me also. You are fed up that in the middle of a climate emergency that we declared, The government has extended a fossil fuel subsidy that will increase emissions and benefit the highest income earners most of all. Well, so am I. You're frustrated that 5 years on, we still don't have an agricultural emissions pricing proposal worthy of the paper that it's written on, and that even some of the industry players that came up with it are threatening to walk away from it. That does my head in. You're frustrated that less than a year after I put in place the most comprehensive plan that Aotearoa has ever had for dealing with climate change, the government is chipping away at it without much of a plan to make up the shortfall. Well, tell me about it. And as you know, I have been told many times to just walk away. As recently as Thursday, in fact. By people with the well-intentioned but mistaken belief that walking away from government and giving up will somehow make our government partners sit up and listen. But Marama and I haven't led the party into government twice to give up the fight now. We have done a pretty good job of the governments that we've been given. But with only 2 ministers, both outside cabinet, we don't always get what we want. We do get frustrated that the government could go further, could go faster. We all know of the challenges that we face, and we also know that the solutions to those challenges are the same as they ever were. What is slowing us down is not an absence of ideas. What is slowing us down is an absence of Green ministers at the cabinet table. What is slowing us down is a majority government. What is slowing us down is the ease with which the difficult decisions about cutting emissions or protecting nature or ending inequality can be avoided. I do not want another generation to inherit the burden of slow progress. I want them to inherit a fair and an inclusive Aotearoa and a thriving natural world to sustain them. So no, I will not give up and walk away right now. I will keep fighting for the government that we need to make those things happen. The only way to face the great challenges of our time with the urgency that those challenges demand is to have more Green MPs in Parliament and more Green ministers in the next government. Now, it is possible to find consensus in many areas of politics. To work through the differences and to find common ground to the benefit of all New Zealanders. Consensus is a guiding principle of the Green Party, and it has been a guiding principle of my work as a minister. I have, in the last 5 years, pushed for the strongest possible climate action that I can get with the governments that I have been given. I have had to make compromises along the way. In a democracy, compromise is how you get any change at all. But science doesn't compromise. Even though we have made incredible progress over the course of the last 5 years, even though we are now one of the only countries in the world with a bipartisan agreement on climate targets, we are still nowhere near where we need to be. We cannot compromise any further on the future of our planet. The stakes are too high, and the consequences of failure are too great. We've witnessed over the course of the last 2 years a seeming never-ending parade of turbocharged disasters. Canterbury, the West Coast, Nelson Tasman, Tairāwhiti, Auckland, Waikato, Northland. The people of Aotearoa know from their lived experience more than ever before the immediacy of the climate crisis, and they want solutions. So yes, this year, 2023, will be a climate change election. And so, To those who want to work with us to form a government after the 14th of October, let me put this as simply as I can. It will not be acceptable to the millions of people who are demanding bolder action, nor to the Green Party, nor to me, if the next government fails to muster the courage and the moral clarity to confront the climate crisis with the urgency that it demands. Every fraction of a degree matters. Every tonne of pollution that is stopped matters. We are in a climate emergency, and it is time for everyone to act like it. Now, we all know that there is no single solution to the climate crisis. There will never be a moment when we can say that we've done all that we can or that we have won. It will take many changes, both big and small, that together add up to a cleaner, greener, safer future. Rooftop solar and community wind turbines so that homes and communities can keep their power on when the storms hit. Stronger homes and bridges built to handle more extreme weather. Inclusive communities that actually have everything that they need in order to be able to support each other when the storms come. Where people have the choice to walk or to cycle or to hop on fast and frequent and affordable buses and trains to meet their friends or to get to the shops or to school or to the park. Buses and trains and cars and bikes that run on electricity, not fossil fuels. Ways of producing food that are good for the planet, good for people, and good for farmers. Thriving native forests and wetlands, healthy oceans and green urban spaces, these are the solutions to the climate crisis. Over the next 7 months, the Green Party will set out a plan for an Aotearoa where everyone has what they need to provide for their family and live a life of dignity, where our precious wildernesses are restored and protected so that they can protect us, and where we are free from the threat of ever-increasing floods and fires and droughts and storms. Our message is simple. If you want a government that delivers that plan for Aotearoa, then you need to give your party vote to the Green Party. More party votes means more Green MPs in Parliament. And more Green MPs in Parliament means more Green ministers in the next cabinet. And more Green ministers in the next cabinet means that we will be at the table to influence the direction of the next government. But none of that will happen. The direction of that government will not change unless you change your vote. Let me put it another way. If you keep on doing what you've always done, you keep on getting what you've always got. Your vote is powerful. Use it. Use it to deliver a government that will not settle until we end poverty in Aotearoa, to make sure that we can pay the bills, to put food on the table, to keep the house warm, to fix the power imbalance between landlords and renters so that no one is forced to pay stratospheric rents to live in damp, mouldy housing, to restore our oceans to health, and to stop the industrial-scale destruction of our marine wildlife, to protect our native birds and the forests that they call home, to finally end mining on conservation land once and for all. And yes, to finally tax the unearned wealth of the top few percent and put that money to work, building a fair society and enough income support so that everybody has enough to live on. Use your vote to get you a government that does all of those things and more. Your vote is powerful. Use it. I'm ready to work with you, ready to fight alongside you, ready to finish the job that we started in 2017. This is a fight for all of the futures, all of our futures. So if you believe, as I believe, as we here all believe, that now is the time to shake off the shackles of visionless government and to make good on the promise that we have made to current and future generations, then this year, in this election, please give your party vote to the Green Party. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.